This episode of Mission Log is brought to you by the official Star Trek Starships collection. Get the Enterprise D for only $4.95 when you sign up today at st-starships.com/missionlog.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. Episode 207, Power Play.
Welcome into Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm Ken Ray.
And I'm John Champion. Each week on Mission Log, we watch an episode of Star Trek. Then we talk about that episode, maybe some other things, sifting through for ideas and ideals which we can apply to our world today.
This week, Power Play, the one where ghosts of a Federation ship lost 200 years ago take over the Enterprise. Or do they?
Spoiler alert! Kind of. I've got Power Play trivia coming up, but first, a few words about a bunch of little starships.
I have a question. How many flat surfaces are there in your office or residence?
Let's see, I'm looking right now. Two.
Okay, yeah, well, you and everybody listening might want to invest in a few more because the official Star Trek Starships collection is flying your way.
Count them, 2 ships a month. Some Federations, some from other civilizations. You get a magazine filled with production notes, design notes, and in-universe info about your ship. You'll get a digital download of the magazine so you can keep the magazine pristine, and you'll get all of that for $20 per ship. 2 ships a month, 2 magazines a month, 2 digital magazines a month, $40 a month.
Plus, you get extra surprises the longer you stay subscribed. And you can start your subscription at a crazy low price. You get the Enterprise 1701D, home to such wonderful characters as Wesley Crusher and Reg Barclay. And, Jean-Luc Picard. Get the Enterprise D and its accompanying magazines for $4.95 to try out. Now, that's just to try it out. If you decide after the first ship, the first magazine, the other magazine, that it's not for you, you can cancel, but you're probably not gonna.
That address to do all of this is st-starships.com/missionlog. st-starships.com/missionlog. Trying it out not only supports this show, it'll also get you a fleet of fun.
That address again is st-starships.com/missionlog. And a big thanks to Eagle Moss for sponsoring this edition of Mission Log. And let me say Mission Log a couple more times if I can, because I want to let people know how to get in touch with us. Is that okay with you, John?
It's okay. You might want to drop in Booby Trap if you're saying Mission Log that many times, too.
I don't get it.
All right.
Mission Log Pod is the address to find us on Facebook, Skype, and Twitter. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, we would love to hear your voice. 323-522-5641 is the phone number to call. 323-522-5641. Our email address is missionlog@roddenberry.com. Our show website, including discovered documents and all kinds of other fun stuff, is at missionlogpodcast.com. And please do remember, we may use your comments on an upcoming episode of Mission Log.
All right, Ken, I got trivia for Power Play. You ready?
Yes, please.
Brace yourself.
Hit me.
Today's show, Power Play, formerly known as The Invaders, kind of a generic title, also the name of a 1960s TV show, a Quinn Martin production. And this episode is also known as Terror in 10 Forward. More about that when I get around to it in a moment. But let's see, the story is credited to Paul Rubin. No, not Pee Wee Herman. Paul Rubens. This is Paul Rubin. And Maurice Hurley. Now, Paul Rubin originally pitched the story. He's not a pro. This is his only professional writing credit. And, of course, we remember Maurice Hurley from seasons 1 and 2 as a producer and writer. So this should give you some indication that this script and this story had been kicked around for a bit and went through many hands. Now, what is less well known is that Jerry Taylor actually wrote one of the early story drafts for this script. In her version, Troi, O'Brien, and Data, though at one point it was Worf rather than Data, were the 3 taken over, but Riker, Keiko, and Guinan would have been the hostages in 10 Forward. Another interesting difference in that draft is that they weren't criminals, but actually the second of 2 electrical species at war on the planet. Also, there was more to do with Picard breaking down alliances between the three. And Beverly would have been in command in that episode, and she would have cut off life support to 10 forward in order to flesh out the aliens. So that's what brings us to the script, which is credited to Renee Bowser, Herbert J. Wright, and Brannon Braga. Now, Renee had the first pass at the script. It's his only Trek credit, but he had a very full career with Law & Order, pretty much all of them. You name a version of Law & Order, and he's got his hands in it somewhere, so don't feel bad for him. Brannon really got the ball rolling, though, on the script. Michael Piller asked him to take the reins, and that version really wasn't going anywhere either. So Brannon did the fourth draft. Again, some interesting differences. Let's see. In his version, Beverly had less to do since the transporter scans were actually looked at by Geordi, and Ro would have been one of the hostages in 10 forward. Data would have had a stutter throughout, which was his tell that, he was a bad guy. It might have actually gotten the axe again, but Herbert J. Wright is credited on the fifth draft with Brannon. He had just come back to the show after a long absence, and he was asked to collaborate. Now, Herb Wright had been around before. He was a producer during Season 1, and we mentioned him again for writing The Last Outpost and The Battle. He came back as a producer for part of Season 5. Now, today's episode was directed by David Livingston. We mentioned David's directing debut with TNG with The Mind's Eye. Otherwise, he was primarily a producer on the show. Let's see, we have a mention of a Daedalus-class starship, which is intriguing. I hope we get to see what one of those looks like one day. And we have a mention of the shuttlecraft Campbell, named after Joseph Campbell. And we have seatbelts in that shuttle, which was a smart thing to do since we had practical movement effects in that shuttle. They actually put it up on lifts so you could move the thing around.
It made me queasy watching it.
Me too, no question about it. Really exciting effect sequence, actually. A lot of effects at the top of the show. We also have that shot that launched 1,000 memes. It is Data slamming his fist on the computer console. Now, famously, this shot in the original standard def version lets viewers see Brent's makeup streaks. He hits the console, and you see the makeup streak off of his hands onto the console. In the HD version, that has been corrected. Let's see. Also, there is a computer screen with 4077 on it, like we had in Half a Life with David Ogden Stiers as a guest star. And see, another weird little thing corrected in the HD version is the color of the turbolift carpeting when we cut to the shot of 3 comm badges just laying there on the floor. The original floor in that shot was brown. It was corrected to red, like the actual set was, where they filmed the actors in that scene, so they corrected it back to red for the remastered version. Now, Marina did break her coccyx performing a stunt in this show. She was the only actor who did her own stunt for the scene in which the landing party is thrown back by the storm. She needn't have done it. You can't see anyone. So, yeah, she took one for the team there. And let's talk about guest stars. Well, you really don't have any. I mean, on our show anyway, we don't really count Rosalind Chow or Michelle Forbes as guest stars since now they fall into that recurring characters category. Though, yes, they are in the credits as guest stars. We do have one guy, Ryan Reed, as a transporter technician. This is only his 3rd out of 4 professional credits, but this all makes sense. Last week was a bottle show, and other than the opening where you have the planet and the shuttlecraft, this is kind of almost a bottle show too. No need to dress it up with expensive guest actors.
Settle in for a good, future-fashioned ghost story. Either that, or just another alien takeover.
Prologue. The moon around Mabu 6 isn't just any moon. It's an M-class moon, and there happens to be a very old distress signal coming from there. Data identifies it as being from the USS Essex, a Daedalus-class ship lost about 200 years ago. She disappeared without a trace. But with that mystery solved and a terribly dangerous storm on the surface, Picard is ready to pack it up and get out of there, until Deanna enters the bridge. She says she can feel the presence of life down there. Act 1. With the storm being too dangerous for transporters, a landing party of Deanna, Riker, and Data will have to take a shuttle to the surface. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your seat and tray tables in their full and upright position. Air sickness bags are somewhere. It's going to be very bumpy. Thrusters fail, and that little shuttle is going down. On the ground, the three are okay-ish. Riker has a broken arm. They'll try to do what they can to contact the Enterprise and look for survivors. A giant storm is coming through, crazy-looking thing, full of flashes of light and electromagnetic radiation. As it gets closer, Deanna says whoever is alive is coming their way with the storm. Back on the Enterprise, Geordi and O'Brien have a very risky idea. O'Brien will beam down with 3 pattern enhancers to try to get the others to beam back up with him. Before you can say, send the one who isn't the father of a newborn, Miles is on his way. When he reaches the surface, they get to work setting up the pattern enhancers. All 3 are in place, and as soon as it switches on, a bolt of lightning from the storm knocks everyone out. While unconscious, it appears that 3 little orbs of light zap their way into O'Brien, Deanna, and Data. Riker sort of stumbles up, activates the equipment, and then all 4 are beamed back up to the ship. Act 2. Waking up in sickbay, Deanna is stunned and almost terrified. She's assured that everyone else is okay, they just need time to rest. On the way to the bridge, new plans are formed. They might be able to adjust scanners to get a better look at the surface, but as Data is talking, his speech becomes distorted. No big deal, certainly not a foreboding indication of things to come. Deanna asks to talk to Picard alone in his ready room. She's making a case for her very strong feeling that they should look in the southern polar region for survivors. Oddly enough, Data is telling Riker they should look in the same place too. Riker disagrees, but Ensign Ro realizes that they're moving into position over the South Pole anyway, and she's locked out of her computer. When Riker asks Data what's going on, well, Data knocks Riker to the floor. O'Brien pulls a phaser and Ro hits the ground too. Seeing an opportunity, Riker locks out the computer, and meanwhile Deanna has knocked Picard out of the way. It's chaos on the bridge. The 3 mutineers escape into the turbolift, but Riker has the chance to lock out the computer control from the bridge. Oh, and he locked out the turbolift. What the hell just happened? Well, we will find out soon enough because the turbolift has stopped, and with the force field set up, they aren't going anywhere. The security team goes there to find 3 comm badges on the floor. The 3 have escaped somehow and are now on the run. More force fields are in place, but Data has a trick up his sleeve, his arm. He uses it to smash the computers in the corridor, breaking through the force fields, and now the 3 renegades find themselves in 10 forward. It gets ugly fast. Phasers are fired, crew members hit the ground, even Keiko is in there with the baby. You know, as you would be with a baby. Deanna, Miles, and Data are the clear winners here. Even Worf is down for the count at the end of Deanna's phaser. Act 3. Okay, so this is unusual behavior for 3 trusted members of the Enterprise crew. There's a hostage situation in 10 forward now, and they have locked out computer access. There's a force field around them, so the transporter can't be used to get them out. Picard calls Dr. Crusher to look at transporter logs. Maybe there's some clue as to why these 3 who beamed back are now acting insane. Meanwhile, down in 10 forward, Deanna is trying to plot Picard's next move while Data is antagonizing Worf. He's all, come at me, bro, and Worf is all, I will come at you, and Deanna is like, ugh, knock it off. Picard is concerned about his crew. He asks Deanna if the people in there need medical attention, but she demands what was demanded earlier, that the ship be moved into orbit around the southern polar region. If they don't, then the hostages will be harmed. Picard has no choice. He orders the course changed. Slowly. It will buy them a little more time. And it looks like Beverly has some more information. The 3 who beamed up altered have some extra neural activity. Anionic, no less. Almost as if another life form had superimposed itself on their brains. Riker wasn't affected, though, and it could have something to do with the fact that his arm was broken. The pain could have prevented the alien from taking hold. Come to think of it, maybe pain would make those beings get out of Deanna, Data, and O'Brien. A plasma shock will do it. It's just a matter of getting an emitter close enough to hit all 3. Ro and Geordi will work on that. And with that, Picard hands himself over as a hostage. It's a calculated move. He'll trade himself for those who need medical attention. And why not? They're already in control of the ship anyway. In 10 Forward, Keiko is trying to calm her crying baby. Miles, or, well, the thing inside Miles, isn't being very fatherly, but some of those scrambled neural patterns seem to recognize her at least a little bit. When Picard arrives, the force fields are dropped, and Deanna introduces herself. Captain Bryce Schumar of the Essex. Act 4. Inside Data is Commander Stephen Mullen, and inside O'Brien is Head of Security Morgan Kelly. Yeah, totally. The ghosts of these 3 people have been trapped ever since the Essex was lost in an electromagnetic storm 200 years ago. That's the story, and he's sticking to it. So why taking over the Enterprise? The disembodied crew of the Essex just wants to rest. Above 10 Forward, Ro and Geordi are getting into place. They drill through the ceiling and can monitor what's going on. Ro lines up a target area. She can make the shot as long as the 3 are close by. Once the shot is made, there's probably a way to contain the entities inside them. Dr. Crusher will work on that solution, probably with help from Dr. Spengler and Dr. Stantz. It'll take time before all the pieces are in place. This gives Worf and Picard some time to talk. Worf is totally convinced of what he's seeing as spirit possession. It must be real. The Klingons have had legends of it forever. Picard says, yeah, that's great and everything, but no. If this was a Starfleet captain, then he wouldn't be behaving this badly. Miles, or the thing inhabiting Miles, is distracted again by Keiko. He's remembering something about giving her the bracelet she's wearing, but she's understandably freaked out at his aggressive stance, especially when he tries to force a kiss on her. Again, it takes Troi, Captain Schumar, to break it up. Picard asks where they're going and what they're going to do when they arrive. The ship is headed to the southern polar region, and it's where Troi says the Essex crashed. All they want is for the Enterprise to beam up their skeletal remains and return them to Earth for burial. Picard says, I'll totally help you. I just need you to let some of the hostages go. After all, this isn't a very Starfleet thing of you to do anyway. Rather than seeing the logic in his request, they start threatening to kill hostages, starting with Worf and Keiko. About that time, Ro has the 3 lined up in her sight and fires just as Data walks away. Troi and Miles hit the ground in agony, but Data threatens to kill everyone in the room if Picard doesn't call off the rescue attempt. Picard notifies Riker, and Riker tells Ro and Geordi to return to the bridge. The little glowing entities that had left Troi and Miles for a moment then make their way back into their host bodies. Now Picard has no choice but to give in to their demands. Act 5. At the South Pole, there is no sign of the Essex, and yet here we are. Troi insists that they're in the right place and sends transporter coordinates to the bridge. Geordi says there's no trace of a ship, just more of that nasty storm. Riker calls back to 10 Forward, and the 3 in charge insist that they have to use the transporter, even though it hasn't been working, and even though Chief O'Brien is the only one who could do it, and even though they will need a transporter pad. This puts him in a tough spot, but Picard has the upper hand. He offers to walk them to Cargo Bay 4, where they can use the transporter there, and he alerts Riker on the bridge as to their plan. All transporter controls will be transferred to 10 Forward for now. Yes, all of them. Nice try. And then everyone will be allowed passage to Cargo Bay 4 because, this might be an opportunity, in quotes, to end this siege. Time to move out. Troi takes Picard as a hostage, Data takes Worf, and O'Brien takes Keiko. The 6 walk through the corridors toward the cargo bay, and all is good. No interference from the Enterprise crew. In the cargo bay, Picard starts asking some more questions. What exactly will happen once the remains are beamed on board? And how will this make these spirits rest? How do they know? This line of questioning is a bit much for Troi, but Picard throws down the glove. Why don't you tell me who you really are, because you definitely are not Captain Schumar. As the transporter is being prepared, on the bridge, Geordi has set up a neutrino thingamajig to isolate the Hoozits. It might be what they need to isolate everyone there, but when it is discovered by Data and O'Brien, they will be out of time. Plan B? Well, Picard will likely blow the hatch and have everyone in the cargo bay blown out into space. And that's only if we need a Plan B. Well, when the transporter is engaged, the The violent glowing storm is beamed up, and it's time for Troi to confess in classic victorious bad guy tradition. All of these entities are the prisoners who were left behind on this moon 500 years ago. They almost escaped with the Essex, but here they are now on the Enterprise. About that time, Riker gives the order for Dr. Crusher to activate her containment field. The hundreds of beings in that swirling storm are captured. Immediately, Troi threatens to kill Picard. But what then? Picard, Keiko, and Worf all step up to say that they will die to protect the others on board the Enterprise. Game over. Picard orders the entities to leave the bodies of his crew, and they will all be returned to the planet's surface. With Troi, Data, and O'Brien back to their usual selves, Troi describes that it was as if their own personalities were pushed aside, and they could only watch helplessly as the action was unfolding. The end.
Do you mind if I correct you on one thing?
Yeah, what is it?
Picard is not going to blow out the hatch.
Well, he assumes that Riker, being in charge,
Right.
will allow the hatch to be blown out. They're on the same page, at least.
Well, they're very much on the same page, except that Riker actually tells Ro there's only one reason he would go to Cargo Bay 4.
Mm-hmm.
When I tell you, you need to be prepared to blow out the hatch.
Because we learned that from Disaster.
Okay, but there are two things this raises for me. First of all, so Riker is not going to be the one to push the button, nor is Picard going to be the one to push the button. Riker's going to make the call, but Ro is actually going to have to push the button. Mm-hmm. Which has to be kind of weird for her, because the whole reason she's still in Starfleet is because Picard has taken a real interest.
Right.
And so she's going to have to be prepared to kill him. But the bigger question this raised for me, how do they get stuff into the other cargo bays? Do you have to bring like everything down the hall? Because that's all carpeting, man. And they're going to ruin that perfectly good 1980s hotel carpeting.
Oh, man. And the carpeting,
unless,
and the wallpaper.
Unless they're beaming everything into each cargo bay, but then wouldn't each cargo bay have a transporter pad?
See?
Yeah, I got problems with the design of this ship. I'm thinking Daedalus class may not be the worst thing.
Right.
Because what are we on now? Constitution, Galaxy? I can't remember. Galaxy class, right?
We're in the Galaxy class. And really, actually, how much cargo room do you need when you got a replicator in every room?
Well, remember, the replicators, though, can't replicate some really complex things, right? Like they had to take drugs one time. So what, you're just going to put that under your bed? No, that goes in the cargo bay, especially because if it's like a whole colony. Here was another thing that really weirded me out. So they're like, oh, hey, it looks like that we think we know where the Essex is. And Picard's like, good, tell somebody we found the Essex. Let's get out of here. I mean, I understand it was stormy. I get that. Right. But seriously, you're not going to like maybe take a look?
It was really, really stormy.
It was really stormy. I understand that. And look, I remember, what nearly happened to LQ Sonny Clemens? Weren't they just going to like shoot the thing that they were on because it was old and dumb? Right? Maybe they weren't shooting it. No, that was actually Star Trek V when the Klingons were shooting the old.
The Klingons.
But they were just going to leave it floating there. I mean, and here it was. It was like a 1996, 1997 piece of technology in the 24th century. And Riker's like, leave it. Who cares? That's the past. We're the future. Let's move on. And so then they're like, oh, wow, this 200-year-old ship that nobody knew what happened to it. Should we look into it? Okay. All right. Well, good.
Yeah. They, Picard likes his old book.
He does.
His old book.
That's true.
And really, he's good. Yeah. After that,
The Essex crashed there. Yes. No, if it had been the Triomphe that crashed there, then I feel certain Picard would have wanted to have a look.
Then he'd be all over it. Yeah.
Or something of the escargot, maybe, if it had been that. Mm-hmm. I'm having trouble thinking of French words right now. I don't know why.
Well, no, escargot is good.
No, it is. Yeah. It is. It really is. You got a little butter.
It is.
Oh,
delicious.
sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, I have a brand new ending for this episode. So, and I kind of shortened the end because Troi has her moment, and then Miles and Keiko have their moment. They have to,
Yeah.
But I thought really what happens is then they turn around, and then it's Captain's log. We return the disembodied criminals to the moon's surface, and somehow somebody, we didn't see it, accidentally bumped into a photon torpedo launch system just as we were leaving.
Oh, and the poor little sprites, the poor little family of Tinkerbells, criminal Tinkerbells.
Criminal Tinkerbells.
Didn't make it. Yeah, Criminal Tinkerbells, by the way, is my cover band for something. It's my Spice Girls cover band. There. Okay.
Oh, God. Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really don't belong in the Spice Girls cover band.
Hey, you had a problem a couple of weeks ago with what felt like the longest prologue in Next Gen history, but this one is super short, and it sets up everything.
Yeah.
I mean, they are on it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no,
that is really cool.
It was really good. Really quick, really zippy. Yeah, I like that.
Hey, you mentioned that, we probably both felt like we would have been ill during that shuttlecraft scene. It was intense. It was a very intense scene.
Yeah.
And one thing I was thinking during that, not only was it horribly tense to watch that happen, it's one thing to glide down in an airplane that has lost engine power. I forget what the exact formula is, but it's something like if an airplane were to lose power, this is really interesting. It's really cool.
All right.
That it can actually glide down, and the altitude loss is something like 10 feet of altitude for every 1,000 feet of distance. It's a long way that an airplane can glide.
So you got lots of time to think about it, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and that's a really cool thing. Okay, now what's horrifying is a shuttlecraft that is aerodynamically very similar to a brick.
Yeah, that's true. That is bad.
Yeah.
I will say you can tell the practical effects. I mean, it's great that they didn't have everybody, okay, lean to the left, lean to the right, sit down, whatever. I feel like the whole thing was killed, though, when they flipped the camera. And I don't know if they actually flipped the camera, if it was just an optical printer thing or a video optical printer or whatever. But, I mean, it was, really harrowing until that we did the full, 360, spinning it all the way upside down. Then I was like, oh, you just totally took me out of it now.
Right.
Yeah.
No, good point.
Kind of a bummer that. But because the practical effect really was amazing. And seriously, I thought I would have thrown up on set.
Yeah, right. Well, like I said, they did blow a huge amount of the budget on doing those effects and doing the practical shuttle effect and using their planet set. So even though, you make up some of that by not having guest stars and then filming everything else on the standing sets, it's a really impressive first act.
Yeah,
they get a lot
really
of action in there. And big shout out to the exploding hatch on the shuttle. That thing flies across the set. It was so cool. Every time something like that happens in a movie, I think of Fred Ward as Gus Grissom shouting, "The hatch just blew. It was a technical malfunction. It just blew."
Yeah,
he's great.
Yeah, that was Remo Williams, right?
Yeah, he's so close. Hey, I have a new idea for a thing.
Okay.
Go with me. So I'm thinking like an unmanned thing that can maybe fly a little bit, maybe by remote control. Mm-hmm. And let's say you need it to go into a dangerous place to drop off equipment, so you don't risk a person. So say it could drop off things like transporter pattern buffers or phasers or coffee.
Let's go back to your man Gus Grissom for a second. I think the thing that happened in the movie, The Right Stuff, right before the hatch blew, or he blew the hatch, or whatever, was he parachuted down to Earth. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking you don't even need a drone. Just make sure what you're dropping is heavy. Yeah. And then attach a parachute.
Just
and
give it a good push.
Yeah. Well,
that's good.
You might actually have to, maybe a really good push, I guess.
Yeah.
You can't just drop it out the Enterprise and hope for the best.
No. Hey, who's the guy walking around in khakis?
Yeah.
He's in a corridor?
Yes.
Yeah.
He's on his way to work his shift at the Enterprise Blockbuster.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure. Or the Enterprise Gap.
Okay,
I'm not sure which. Yeah. You know what? Really, it's the belt, right? Because you're right. Yeah. He's in khakis and a shirt, but we've seen that before. It's the belt.
It is.
And I'm like, this is seriously just some guy who wandered on set.
That's what it feels like.
It does. Yeah. It does a bit.
One thing that I always liked about Next Gen is that even though we've kind of taken them to task for the logic of having kids on board or not, or, do you do this? And it was an argument that went on and on throughout the show. But the fact that you have families on board, something that we were always sort of promised, is that you would see daily life in the 24th century. So you would expect the corridors to not just be full of people in uniform. You would expect people to be doing other things. Last week, there was a young woman who was in a swimsuit because she had just been swimming in the holodeck. And then if you go to school, there's kids, and they're not in uniform. They're in kid clothes, doing kid things, So I thought that was neat. But this stands out because it's like the only one that we've seen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the kids, you're right, they're in kids' clothes, but they're in space kids' clothes.
Oh, space
Yeah,
kids
you talk
clothes,
about
man.
the space ice cream dish and the space spoon and all that stuff. Even the people who are in their civvies are in their space civvies, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
that guy was wearing something that I pretty much could have been wearing at the same time.
Yes.
That's what makes that stand out so much. It's not just that he's the only one. It's that, seriously, he could have bought that outfit at Kmart.
He could have. He might have. He
have.
might have.
You know,
actually.
they did blow a lot of money on the first act, as you say.
They did.
They may have been like,
did.
yeah, we don't have the money for space pants for this one. Just tell him to bring his own pants. Make sure they're pressed.
Right. We'll give him a big old space belt. Man, some good acting in this episode, but that snarl on Data's face. This was another fun one to go back and watch over and over, to just focus on particular performances of people who are in the background.
Yeah.
You know, there's some good camera work here. There's a nice shot where Worf and Picard are having a conversation in 10 forward, and in the background you've got Data having a conversation with Troi. And even just their body language, they're kind of, a little out of focus, but their body language, they're all worked up, and you hear little bits and pieces of that conversation. It's just good. And man, Brent really chews the scenery in this.
Yeah. And Marina Sirtis is amazing in this episode as well.
Oh, man, is she good. She's so good.
It is not a great Troi episode. It is a great Marina Sirtis episode, though.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned it in the prologue. I couldn't help think of the trailer, because years and years and years and years and years ago, I worked in a movie theater. I think around the time that Sweet Home Alabama was coming out, the Reese Witherspoon movie. I won't call it classic because I never even saw it, but there was this one part in the trailer that we always loved. You've got a baby in a bar. It's like, wow, really? 10 Forward. I'm beginning to wonder about 10 Forward. I used to think that would be the bar I'd want to go to. I might just buy a bottle and take it back to my quarters. It's like,
right.
Wow,
right.
You brought a baby.
I have a similar question for this episode that I had last week, or really any time that our crew is taken over or has their brains messed with. How much do they remember? And how much control do they have? So does Data now remember how to be a horrible criminal? Does he erase that part of his memory or not? So what's interesting here is that the criminal personality is dominant. They do. Troi actually says it was like she was there watching it but couldn't do anything about it.
Right.
And Miles says he would have killed that part of him if it came to it. Yet they still know, the criminals that are in there, they know how the Enterprise works. And the one inside Data knows how Data works, and he talks like Data, or at least he does a passable impression of him while on the turbolift. So the criminal beings that are in there, they actually are picking up a lot of knowledge from the beings that they're in. And I would assume that they also picked up knowledge from the crew of the Essex, because they're able to say things about the Essex. But then the flip side of that, like I said, does Data, somewhere down the road just go like, oh, hey, remember that time that I was a horrible criminal keeping everybody hostage and I almost beat up Worf? Well, here's something I learned from that. Well, we'll apply that in this situation.
I'm actually curious about, is there ever any mention of why they chose to make Data one of the people taking over instead of Worf? Because, I mean, look, it's a show about the 24th century. I understand that. But one of the things that was actually troubling for me is how easily the entity was able to take over Data.
Right.
I would think there'd be some issue there with like, this is a machine. I mean, could he just as easily then have taken over the computer of the Enterprise? And wouldn't that have been convenient?
Yeah.
Actually, that would have been much more convenient. I would think that there would be, I mean, like Riker being in pain was enough that they couldn't take his body over.
Right.
But you could take over a robot.
Right.
Or an android. I'm sorry.
Right.
I'm wondering why. I mean, is there anything in the notes that you saw, or anything that you? Is there any reason that it was Data instead of Worf?
No, interestingly, not anything that I saw in the notes, but in Jerry Taylor's draft, it just seemed that she. I don't know if it was a combination of two drafts, but it was just that at a certain point, it was no longer Data, it was Worf.
Or
okay. I'm sorry, yeah.
Or no longer
yeah.
Worf, it was Data.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kind of odd. I thought we learned some interesting things about the crew.
Okay.
in this episode. It's like, so 10 forward is full of people, including a baby. Let's remember.
Yes.
And they're like, what do we do? It's like, oh, well, let's just stun everybody.
Yeah.
We'll take care of them all later. It's like, stun them all. We will know our own, said Riker, which I thought was interesting. I also thought it was really great that when Crusher comes up with the whole thing, it's like, wow, so your arm was broken, so you were in pain. Maybe if we make everybody in pain. And Ro's like, oh, yeah, got this. I know how to do that.
Right.
Oh, I mean, does anybody have any ideas about how we might? She was quick with that.
She was. Well, and speaking of Ro, it's a really good thing that she and Geordi were whispering in the Jeffries tube. Right above, not even a Jeffries, but the crawl space right above 10 forward, so that the android with superhuman hearing wouldn't know that they were there.
Right. Well, again, it wasn't the android, though. It was somebody taking over the android.
Who knows how an android works? Yeah.
Maybe Data was sitting there the whole time going, I can totally hear them, but I'm not going to tell him because it might be bad.
Oh, that's good, yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, what is wrong with that Jeffries tube, Geordi? Geordi is talking smack about that tube, and I'm thinking, you know what? We should all be so lucky that the crawl spaces in our homes would be that clean and accessible and well organized and nicely lit. So, yeah. Yeah.
Hey, I had a question actually about it was actually one that you mentioned last week. So they're testing the weapons, right? Macduff and Worf are testing the weapons,
right?
In whatever conundrum,
right? And
they like just fire off the phaser and like, oh well, hopefully that doesn't hit anything at some point. So she's got like this little Ro has this little like laser drill,
right?
And she's able to just drill right through, and apparently not kill anybody beneath. Or not hit the floor or anything, right?
Right,
it's just like, oh, it's just going to drill down just this because it's light.
Yeah. So they call Riker like, okay, we're through to 10 forward. Oh, and it looks like we're also through to 11 forward.
Exactly.
And it's going to keep on going down to 12 forward.
Couple decks down. Yeah. Well, no, I could see her like actually stopping once it hits the carpet in 10 forward. Mm-hmm. But at that point you've hit the carpet.
Yeah.
And even the criminally insane Data should be able to like, you smell something?
Yeah. There's a clever bit of setup where Miles yells, I gave you that. And he walks over to Keiko. And meanwhile, we've just heard nothing but crying baby every time we're in 10 forward.
Right.
Which is kind of hilarious. I gave you that. But he walks over and he looks at the bracelet, not at the baby. Just a nice, funny little bit that they have there, and what is actually kind of a terrifying scene, but it is it is a funny setup.
Yes.
Also, let's see. This episode, we learned that you can officially command the Enterprise from a computer in 10 forward.
As it should be.
Yep. So the bartender can do that.
Please, if Riker's not on the bridge, he's in 10 forward, so come on.
That is a good point. And I still wonder about Data, because at the end of all of this, man, it is good to have him back again to the same old Data who so many times has had his conscience taken over and made to do terrible things and almost kill his fellow crew members. Can we maybe start to look at some new protocols to help prevent that from happening? Because it just seems like as long as we have Data on board, that might keep happening. Maybe that answers why there aren't any other Datas on any other ships, because it ends in disaster.
The question, though, is who is going to order that, though? Because how many times has that happened to Picard? Mm-hmm. So really, is Picard going to be the one to... You're right, absolutely. I would say 2 times somebody's possessed. Let's say 10 times somebody's possessed, then we have to relieve them of duty. Because, otherwise Picard's like, yeah, all right, I'm next.
All right. Best line in the show? At the end, when Worf and Data are having their little exchange, we're kind of wrapping up everything with a bow, and Data says to Worf in that threatening scene, regarding that threatening scene, your restraint was remarkable. Worf says, you have no idea. Worf has been getting all the good one-liners.
Like a Hall & Oates song, it is a case of possession obsession. Like a Crowded House song, I feel possessed. I could do this all day. Actually, those are the only 2 I can think of.
So every time I watched this episode, I kept expecting a different line from this one scene. Worf and Picard are talking over, who the people are possessing them, or taking over, Deanna and Data and Miles. And Worf says, spiritual possessions of this sort have been reported throughout Klingon history. It's called Jutlin, the taking of the living by the dead. And I just kept expecting Picard to say, yes, human history is full of crap, too.
I would have loved that.
Yeah. Not that I think he would be that dismissive of what Worf had to say, but that seriously is what I kept expecting.
It's really funny because Worf clearly is taking this very seriously.
Yeah.
And Picard is doing what a good captain is doing. He's listening to the advice of his crew.
Yes.
And he just says, yes, okay, thank you for that. We're going to approach this in a completely different way. Because I reject your premise.
Here's the thing, though. How can you outright reject the premise? I mean, Star Trek, Shakespeare, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy, right? I mean, it seemed to me that it was possible. I mean, just because we're kind of doing a horror story show at this point. Mm-hmm. I mean, and so where we're going to draw the line, okay, so let me get this straight. You guys were alive, you were ripped from your bodies, but you can't possibly be these other people who were alive and ripped from their bodies. Because, I mean, remember, they actually said we were prisoners and then a thing happened and now we just float around. So they weren't energy beings when they got there.
Right.
So then why couldn't it have been, possession by these dead people? No. The dead are dead. These guys just never died.
Well, right. But we don't know what the other physicality was that those aliens had. We don't know what it was so that may very well be how those aliens live. They could be a distant cousin of the Q for all we know, and they could appear and disappear with a flash of light. I mean, the point of I think Picard's skepticism, that's kind of the big and the only really interesting kind of message here, not even a message, but just sort of a central idea in this episode, is that as far as human understanding of the universe, there is the natural world, and there is the natural world. So this has a natural explanation. The natural explanation is that that's how those aliens live. Those aliens have a component to them, which is an electrical thing that moves around, and that thing could be studied, and that thing could be contained, and that thing could be moved from one place to another, and it has all these properties. It has properties that can be studied. But as far as human beings go, human beings live and then they die and they don't come back because there's not another thing in them that could be measured or studied or contained or in any other way attributed with properties.
Okay, wait. Did I mention, though, the special planet with the special storm?
Right. Yes, we have a special planet with a special storm. That's what one might call hand waving. And if you were to treat this as scientific reality, you would say, "Oh no, but the rules don't apply to my thing because I'm waving my hands over here."
Right. What's the middle part? Then a miracle.
And then a miracle happens.
I mean, that's right. Then a miracle happens. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, I kind of had a feeling, and of course I didn't read ahead on your notes, but I kind of had a feeling that this is where you were going to go with this. And I can understand why you would be inclined to, except that I thought they told us that the prisoners were once physical beings who got separated from their physicality. And if that can happen to them, I mean, then you're obviously talking about some weird thing they didn't expect, because look, they can't just fly off the planet and go back to their planet without actual bodies. Right?
Well, we don't know what all their properties are, but we do know that one of their properties is they can't fly through space, or at least they can't fly through space long enough to get back to their planet. They have to have like a host body of some sort. So not unlike the doomed romance between Beverly Crusher and a slug that lives inside a dude.
Really? You're going with that one? Because I thought you were going to go with the one with the person who dresses up for the basketball games.
You could go with that one too.
Yeah, I can't remember. I cannot remember anything about that episode now. What was his name? Yeah. Okay. Don't worry about it. It's fine. I was going to try to remind people, but whatever. Look up the thing, and there'll be a do, and you'll understand what we're talking about.
Yeah.
All right. So really, what you're seeing is the central message of this whole thing is no supernatural. There's natural and there's natural and we're done.
I think there's a good lesson in skepticism in this episode.
Okay.
Worf is ready to believe in spiritual possession because he's inclined to do so, because that is the mythology he was brought up with, and it fits the stories he has heard before. So he just comes to the conclusion before actually weighing out any evidence. Now, we're supposed to go with Picard on this. Picard does what we should do, is that he takes in the claim, he processes the claim, then he asks for an explanation, and then he waits to see if the evidence fits the claim within that explanation. And in the end, it's great because he's heard enough, and he straight up asks, okay, all right, one last time now, what's the scientific basis for the claim that your souls will rest, quote unquote, rest, the further away you get from the planet, because now you're just making up stuff.
Right,
you know?
right. And certainly their case is not helped by Deanna going, shut up.
Right.
Yeah, I get that.
Right.
I understand what you're saying. It's just, I mean, well, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. Well, I do. I think this is an interesting thing. So I had all that trivia about how this episode was developed and how many times it changed. Now, knowing what I know about Brannon, and first of all, I know that he's a big James Bond fan. So it's not out of the question that he would do an episode like this. And I know that he's something of a bit of a skeptic too. But none of the ghost stuff or any other the plot details about the Essex, none of that was in his draft. Herb Wright actually put all of that in after he did his fifth draft of this. So I was a little bit surprised to learn that. And I think that's one of the things that makes this episode interesting, because otherwise it is just, okay, you've got a being taking over part of the crew, and they're going to do stuff with hostages, and we got to get them out. And we either have to kill them or learn who they are. Now, in one of those drafts, they're not criminals. Like I said, they were just one group of another group of kind of energy-ish beings. And there was kind of a civil war going on between those two groups. So once the Enterprise has those beings captured, Picard has to decide, like, look, you guys are on the losing end of this battle. That's why you wanted to get away. That's why you wanted to come to our ship and take over our people. But too bad, we're just going to send you back to the planet where you've got to fight it out with the other energy beings that you're having this fight with.
Wow.
So, yeah, right?
Really? Not even an offer to, like, negotiate with them or anything?
Nope.
You're kidding me. Well, well, good that was left out. Although, to be honest with you, I don't want to get into the part yet about whether this is whether we like the episode or whatever. I did find a couple of problems in Act 5.
Okay.
It's interesting that you say that Braga is a James Bond villain.
Because he's not a James Bond villain.
I'm a James Bond
Brandon's
fan.
actually a TV producer.
I apologize. You say he's a James Bond fan because there is a total James Bond villain thing that happens in the end. The fake Captain Schumer, tells Picard the whole story. And I don't know why he did that. He shouldn't have done that. At the very least, he could have kept Picard guessing long enough to, whatever. But, if you're close enough to drop poison down a thread, you're close enough to put a bullet in his head. That's it. I mean, that's the thing. You don't say, well, we're close enough to the finish line now. I'm going to stop and tell you. No. Cross the finish line and then say now, well, I'm just going to let you see what happens. How's that?
Yeah, there was a bit of over explanation there in the classic James Bond bad guy tradition. And actually, there's a moment much earlier in the episode where we learn again why you should never announce what you're going to do before you do it. Okay, so think about that scene. Ensign Ro and Geordi are in the access hatch above 10 forward, and three things have to happen. Okay, you have to turn off the shields, you have to make the shot, and then you have to turn on the containment field that Dr. Spengler and Dr. Stantz have created. Okay, so those three things have to happen, and Geordi tells us he's got 7 seconds to do it. That's the window, right? So he's ready to do it. All right, Ro tells him they're in range, and he says, all right, I'm turning off the force field. And then she says, I'm preparing the plasma thing to make the shot at the guys who are all lined up where I need them. And in the time that she's explaining that, she could have taken the shot.
Hey, forgive me, though. Aren't you missing a step as well? Didn't she tell Geordi and Geordi told Riker?
Yes, because Riker had to tell Beverly to turn on the containment field or be ready with the containment field. There's a lot of talk. There's a lot of announcement. And if you didn't have that announcement that takes at least like what feels like 5 minutes, but is actually a few seconds, you don't announce that you're going to take the shot, just like you don't announce what your criminal intentions are.
Okay, let me say, the problem with what you're saying is then we would have ended the show in Act 3. But it might have actually been okay to end the show in Act 3 because now we come to my second problem with Act 5.
Okay.
These people who have taken over the Enterprise, right, are these beings. They've been left alive or as close to alive as floating disembodied energy beings can be over the course of 500 years. For 500 years.
Right.
They've been I don't even think you call it in prison at that point because Picard said, so this is a penal colony. The guy's like, yeah, we've been here for like 500 years. Okay, it's not prison anymore. That's hell. Or that's just absolute. That's not even, what's the word I'm looking for? That's not even like when you send somebody away. What is that called? When you send somebody away.
I don't know because I've never done that.
It's like a big, I can't think of the word. Never mind. Okay. It's not prison is my point. I mean, that's like forever. You've now basically left these people forever. All right. Yeah. So let's talk about that cruelty. But then let's talk about Picard's willingness to just leave them to float as disembodied beings for the rest of eternity. So like they've said, we were put here because it's a prison. Okay. So they're honest about the fact that they're there from prison. Right. But we don't know why. We don't know for how long. We don't even know if the people who imprisoned them are still alive. Right? I mean, we don't know if they're being punished or if this is supposed to be a rehab or what it is. And granted, they should not have tried to take over the Enterprise. But I was amazed to find that, I mean, Picard's willingness to just turn his back on this whole thing from the very beginning of the episode, I guess, from the prologue is amazing. It's like, hey, we found this 200-year-old ship. Oh, so what? Hey, there are hundreds of people trapped down here. Well, let's be sure and trap them real good this time. Don't forget the cones, by the way. We're going to want to leave cones around this planet so this doesn't happen to anybody else.
I think he's got a lot of information to go on, though. So we know that those criminals don't want to be dead. And we know that they can only live by having host bodies, and the nearest convenient host bodies would be all those bodies in the Enterprise. We don't know what their crimes are. We don't know who put them away. We really know nothing about them or how bad it could get if we let them out. And the only thing that we know is keeping them where they are is where they are, is that planet. Yeah. So, I would put the cones up for sure. I would take good notes. I would probably, I don't know, maybe get the word out. Well, but here's the thing. If you get the word out, and if people show up, let's say a Klingon ship flies by.
Well, Klingons are our friends now. Let's say Romulans.
Well, no, I not even that the Romulans are or the Klingons are good guys. The point is the Klingons are big and tough. And I imagine those criminals who might be perfectly happy to take over Deanna's body and be able to mastermind the takeover of a ship, if they've got a bunch of wharf bodies that they can take over and suddenly they're smart and dangerous and also tough and can withstand a phaser hit or two, then we could be in trouble. So I think I side with Picard on this. Put them back, leave them where you found them, and put up the cones.
It is surprisingly cruel from Picard. And I'll be honest, while this is, I'm crossing over into, all right, let's not do that. Let's not do that yet. Okay. There is a way that I think this episode, there are a couple of ways I think this episode could have been more interesting, that it could have actually gone into something a bit more philosophical. There is one thing that kept coming up in this episode, though, and that's why I'm sort of surprised that the only thing you bring up is the whole skepticism thing. There's also a big live for your die angle in this episode. I mean, at the end, Picard is marching them all to the one place where they can just be blown out into space, because it's more important that those things be stopped than he live. And he even he throws himself, into the mix right at, I guess it's in Act 3. And he's like, let go of all the injured people, and I'll be your prisoner. And Riker's like, whoa, wait a minute, that puts you in danger. And I love the fact that Picard's like, dude, I'm in danger. there's no separation here as far as he's concerned. Picard's not going to be hopping in a shuttle and taking off to make sure that he's safe. He's not going to have a cadre of security people around him to make sure he's safe either. One of his crew is in trouble. Actually, okay, 15, let's say. But 15 of his crew are in trouble. Mm-hmm. So he's in trouble. And I mean, there's a lot said here. The skepticism thing, you're right, is sort of like the most interesting, I don't know, moral or philosophical thing that we can look at in this episode. But, I mean, you just get like a really good shot at leadership in everything Picard does, you know, with the added bonus of, and there's no such thing as ghosts.
Well, here's the thing. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think that there is clearly there's a big thread of the needs of the many outweighing the needs of the few or the one. Mm-hmm. Picard doesn't know that by taking them to the cargo hold, he is also taking people who will be hostages. So he assumes that he will go because he can lead them through. The decision to take more hostages happens after the fact, after he volunteers to do that. So he didn't necessarily know that Keiko and Worf would be there with him. But yeah, it is a great example of leadership that, you know, Worf is more, Picard is more concerned about the fact that the rest of the crew would be safe if he, along with those entities, can be blown out into space. Mm-hmm. Keiko is more interested in the idea that her baby will live if it takes her being blown into space. And Worf, you know, Worf, again, with such a great line saying that it would be an honor to die protecting his ship. Mm-hmm. You know, because he values the lives of everyone else so much higher than his seemingly insignificant sacrifice to help them. So they all display that kind of leadership. They all display that kind of judgment. Maybe we're meant to believe that this is kind of one of those inherent Starfleet things of the future that we are so bought into that message that we would gladly do that to protect others.
With the disembodied criminals beamed off of the Enterprise, it is time to see what we can take from Power Play.
It's the time now in the show where we talk about, the show, We talk about the messages, the morals, the meanings, the action, the adventure, the acting, and see whether the whole thing stands the test of time. Power Play, John. Does Power Play hold up as far as you're concerned?
It's great fun. Mm-hmm. It's just all about the action and the mystery. Picard outsmarting the bad guys. And it's also the fun of seeing well-known characters acting out of character. Mm-hmm. I kind of wondered if this is a sort of luxury that Next Gen has by going as long as it does compared to the original series. There are more opportunities to break the characters out of the molds that we have for them. You know, we got to do that a few times in TOS, obviously Mirror Mirror and things like The Enemy Within. And you have these moments, This Side of Paradise, where you get to tweak the characters and just totally make them go in a different direction. Mm-hmm. But it seems like we've gotten a lot more of that in Next Gen. And it's fun. It's great to see these really good actors doing new and different acting. The episode is Die Hard in Space. It's also kind of like an alternate version of All Our Yesterdays. You know, instead of having the benevolent Sargon, you've got just a bunch of horrible criminals taking over our crew's bodies. And
I'm sorry, forgive me. All Our Yesterdays, that's TOS. That's the things that were like generation ship things, but got stuck on a planet or something.
They were in orbs. They were the last remaining people from their civilization, mm-hmm. and supposedly after they borrow Kirk's and Spock's bodies for a little while, they will go into robots. But they're not going to do that. Sargon was going to do that.
All right.
But you know, Spock got the bad one, and he's a bad guy.
You know, I'm thinking one day you and I should actually watch TOS.
Oh, God, that would be great. That would be so much fun.
It's been a few years.
Yeah. And you know what? I love seeing Marina kick butt in this.
Yeah.
She's so good, and it's so awesome to see her be tough. I talked a few weeks ago about how I wanted to see her finish the job in beating up Jev. And, but I felt like finally we got to see her with a bit more anger and edge and toughness and rawness, and that was great to watch.
Yeah.
So to me, I enjoyed watching this the first time, just reacquainting myself with the episode, and I love rewatching it each time in prep for this show. So I think it definitely holds up. Now we can talk about whether or not it's a consequential show. But as far as just an episode, as far as entertainment, as far as production value and acting, I think all of those things fire. How about you?
Well, it's interesting that you say we can talk about whether it's consequential, because my note says it is a good show, but inconsequential, because it is. I mean, I mean, I may get nitpicky here because, nit, am I right?
Yeah, right.
We're getting into a more mature storytelling is what we keep talking about with Star Trek. People say, and this is the part they're really excited about, right? A type of storytelling where we're dealing with feelings and things that happen to people, character development, things like that. But we're still doing the wrap-up in 48 minutes. So the entity that controlled Miles tried to force himself on Keiko, was certainly threatening with Keiko, used his knowledge of Keiko to get into her head. All right, now you two go home, all right?
Yeah.
And it'll be fine. Yeah. I feel certain it'll be okay. And we know it's going to be okay because we see them both holding their baby at the end. Right. If we shadows have offended, chillax, because next week it's still Miles and Keiko, and they'll be arguing about socks. I think there are a couple of ways, and I'm sorry to do the whole rewrite thing, but I want this episode to matter because this episode is really good. This episode's a lot of fun, and this episode is incredibly well acted. It is not, as I said before, it's not Troi that you can applaud in this episode because her character almost doesn't exist in this episode. But boy, Marina Sirtis, and you like seeing her kick butt. I like seeing her stand there toe-to-toe with Patrick Stewart.
Yeah. No,
that is not something her character ever gets to do, except for, Captain, you're too tired. Go home. Right. That's an order. That's like the toughest she gets with Picard to this point. Right. And to see Marina Sirtis stand there with Patrick Stewart and say, no, you shut up. I mean, it's like, wow, because almost nobody gets to do that as far as like the regular actors on the show, right? I thought it would have been interesting, actually, to have Miles fight the thing. Like when he says, I gave that to you, I thought he was going to actually start to weaken. I thought he was maybe going to have some sort of turmoil between who he is and what he's being forced to do. And could he break out of that? And that leads to interesting philosophical ideas, but that didn't happen. What I think would have been really interesting is if they go ahead, let's say Ro pushes the button, right? Yeah. And everybody gets knocked out. And Picard's like, we're going to leave you on the planet. And what if the thing's like, no, don't? What if there's a moral issue for the second half of the show where it's like, okay, so Captain's Log, we found these prisoners and we're going to take them back to prison, but it's been 500 years and we don't even know who left them here and they can't stay with us and they understand that, but they don't want to go back to the planet. I mean, because there was an option to just blast them into space. You joked about it earlier, actually. Oh, whoops, somebody accidentally hit a thing and now they're all dead. Who's to say they wouldn't want that? It's just a monster movie. It would be a great Halloween episode. It would be a fantastic Halloween episode. But all they do in the end is they're like menacing. They're like, oh, you better not come back here. Really? Because it's a vacation spot. I was totally planning on coming back here. I mean, I really wish there had actually been where we're doing so much with character, where we're doing so much with story. I really wish there had just been a tiny bit of, aside from the leading by example, and aside from the skepticism thing, I wish that anybody at any moment had a moral sort of like, wow, was that right? What we just did? Or is what we're about to do right? I kind of miss it for that. Now, that said, I enjoyed it every time I watched it as well. I can't really complain, except apparently I can because I just did. Talk to me about messages, if you would, sir. Were there any?
Well, part of me just says, who cares?
Okay.
This is an action-adventure episode, so if we're racking our brains to come up with something deep and philosophical about it, we needn't worry. Now, if I had to dig and find something serious about it, it's that Star Trek still takes a position that it has taken many times before, and that I think is valid. It's something personally I definitely respect, that there are explanations in the natural world for things we don't understand, and we have to exhaust those things first before moving to the alternative. Picard, like I said, he represents that journey of actually doing the investigative work to figure out what this is, instead of just taking the answer like, yeah, well, they're ghosts, so because we said we're ghosts and we're done, so believe what we say. Also, remember, kids, crime does not pay.
Yeah.
You will just find yourself stranded in the polar region of some hellish planet, and you do not want that for 500 years. Or even 5 minutes.
That's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, 5 minutes might be okay if your other option is 500 years.
Well, yeah. True. What about you?
Oh, just the stuff I said before, honestly. I mean, the mark of a great leader thing. I mean, because it really is. I mean, Picard is just leader, just like fantastic leader here. It's not just strength of leadership. It's not just on, wow, Patrick Stewart delivered that well. I mean, it's the whole, of course I'm going to put myself in harm's way because I'm already in harm's way because, if one of my people is suffering, I'm suffering. There's a little Tom Joad. Yeah, there's a little Jesus. There's a little, all the big heroes. Maybe not so much Superman because he could have been hurt. That was really the one message that was there for me. And again, I understand what you're saying about the skepticism. Mm-hmm. The problem is it's happening in Star Trek. It's happening in things. Well, I'm okay with it even happening in Star Trek. It's happening with things that have been ripped from their bodies. In fact, come to think of it, they say they've been floating there for 500 years. Something happened and they were ripped from their bodies. Maybe they were only supposed to be there for 10. Maybe this was a death sentence and now it's been 500 years. I mean, and so if you set up that improbability, I mean, it goes back to This Side of Paradise, honestly.
Yeah.
All the things there were so improbable, but they worked. And so once you've told me, okay, these are the rules by which we're playing and they all work, then I got to say that what's happening there is absolutely perfect. And so once you tell me, okay, so this storm is so weird that you can pull somebody's essence, their ka, their ineffable being, from their body, well, then there's no reason it couldn't have been Schumer. Except, it turns out it's not Schumer because these are going to be bad guys because our dead people stay dead when you kill them. But these other dead people, they actually live for 500 years because they're light. Okay. Right. Except they weren't light, but now they are. So, I mean, to me, honestly, even without the skepticism thing, it's still a great episode as far as the leadership thing. And it's just a ripping good yarn.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. All right. Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. Executive producer, Rod Roddenberry. You can find out more at roddenberry.com. Go there to check out news about Roddenberry Entertainment, products from Roddenberry Entertainment, and there's so much more, like the very good work that is being done by the Roddenberry Foundation. Again, roddenberry.com is sort of your launching point to find out all of that. For more exciting Star Trek podcasts, check out Trek FM. That's trek.fm. And for the latest in Star Trek news and discussion, be sure to visit trekmovie.com.
Next week, ethics.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com, and from the album Messages by Key Theory, free to download at kitheory.com. Too bad about the Essex. It would have been fun to see Starfleet officers from before the time of Kirk and Spock. Can you imagine? End transmission.